Hey everybody! So this is going to be my first book review video. I'm reviewing Wicca, A Modern Practitioner's Guide by Arin Murphy-Hiscock, and she's also done The Green Witch, and she's done a lot of other little books about this size, about this sort of little square size here. These, sort of small little square books. I kind of like them because they're, they kind of fit comfy in your hands. And I like this one because it has like a really nice kind of marbled effect on the cover, and this pretty pink and purple color, and the nice shiny sparkly gold pentacle in the front. So I really like how this is done. I also like, so I'm gonna say the things I like generally about how the book is like put together and laid out, and then I'm gonna get deeper into the chapters that I liked, or the chapters. I'm gonna go chapter by chapter, but I'm gonna mention the ones that I like the most, and I'm gonna go most deeply into the ones that I liked the most. She frequently has, so this is what the chapters look like. They all have these little pentacles at the beginning, and they will have like a little summary of the chapter, and I really appreciate that because it's really helpful. I also like how she has these little insets that I think are also really helpful for processing information. There's often like a whole lot of information in witchcraft books, and I think it can be a lot sometimes to just get your head around, because there's a lot of complex theoretical concepts and stuff, or just practical concepts that are hard to get your head around. So I think that's really helpful. And now I want to. I also just like that there's multiple books in her series. I like that it's a. I like that it's a series with multiple books, and she'll refer to her other books. Like a couple of times in this book, she'll say like, you can refer to my book, Power Spellcraft for Life, which I also think that sounds like a really cool title, because the idea of not just spellcraft, but power spellcraft sounds just really badass. And I like that, you know where to get more information, and that you can conveniently go to these other books that she's done. And I also want to say, I usually get books from my library, so if as a Wiccan or pagan you're not familiar with your local public library, I'm going to be doing a whole lot of review videos probably, and in case you're wondering like, how does this girl buy so many books? I don't. I do not buy that many books. If my public library has it, I don't buy it, and I often, I try not to buy books. I do have some, and if it's something that like my book club is reading and I don't, because I have a pagan book club as well, which I also highly recommend becoming part of, something like that. But like if they're reading something, I will buy it if the library doesn't have it. But otherwise, I try really hard not to buy books, because it's like an Achilles heel for me. It is my weakness, and I know that, so I try not to do it. Okay, let's just find my notes real quick. Good old trusty, handy dandy notebook. Made a lot of notes on this, so that's why it's a little tough to find them. Okay, so and I also wanted to say the cover, when you see it, it could seem a little bit fluffy. You could think, oh, this is going to be like a book that's all about aesthetics, which, nothing wrong with that if the book is all about aesthetics, but this book is certainly not fluffy or all about aesthetics. It gets down into some very nitty-gritty details and processes and skills. Let's see. And so it goes really deep into the basics of witchcraft, and it also goes into some techniques that I haven't seen covered yet. And again, I'm still what I would consider to be a beginning pagan and Wiccan. I've only been doing this 2 years, so the fact that I haven't seen things talked about that much doesn't mean they're extremely rare or obscure. It just means that maybe they're a little bit more advanced. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would say it's probably a pretty good book for a beginner or intermediate witch who wants to go a bit deeper into the nitty-gritty of how to do things, and wants a glimpse of some more advanced things that you could do. I appreciate that the chapters focus more on types of skills than types of spells. And if you've read many beginner Wicca books, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about here. But sometimes you'll get a book and it's like it tells you like different ways of doing magic, like, oh, you can do magic with sigils, or you can do magic with candles. Or it will be organized by spells, like you could do spells for prosperity, you could do spells for love, though that's getting maybe a little bit more. I think a lot of people don't do spells for love because of ethical concerns, but that's just an example. But I really like that this book is not organized in either of those ways. It's organized like, so it has chapters that, obviously it has chapters. And the chapters are organized by, I would say, type of skill. So the first one is Practicing Wicca, which is sort of more about an overview. The second one is Sacred Space, which is about how to make sacred space. Chapter 3 is Casting Circles, which is about how to cast circles. Chapter 4 is Spells and Energy Work, which is about how to do spells and energy work. You see what I'm getting at. Each one is about how to do something, and in a particularly broad category. So like chapter 4 is like how to do spells. She doesn't break that up into different kinds of spells. She's teaching you the theory and practical means to do any kind of spell that you would want to do. So I think that's particularly useful, whether you're beginning or you've been doing this a little bit longer and just need a refresher. And yeah, I want to talk about chapter 2, 3, and 4 for a minute, because those were some of my favorites. So I didn't love the first chapter, Practicing Wicca, just because I think while it did give some good background and historical context for Wicca, which I think everybody should have a little bit of when they're starting for sure, I think it didn't, some of the ethical and theoretical things that it brought up, and beliefs that it brought up, I don't think she was representing them as though all Wiccans believe them. And I mean, I don't think she was saying all Wiccans believe these things, but I think she was saying these are general concepts or precepts of Wicca, and I don't necessarily think they are. Like, she gives 13 things that all witches believe. I forget what those are called, but it was, let's see, 13. What were those? Yeah, she goes into what are the Wiccan tenets of belief, an ethical code as outlined in the Wiccan Rede. And then, she talks about different beliefs, which, again, I think these are kind of helpful on the one hand, like a belief for tolerance of other religions, belief in reincarnation in the afterlife, respect for nature. But for instance, I wouldn't say that belief in reincarnation or an afterlife is by any means really a Wiccan thing that all Wiccans believe, or that you can even take for granted that Wiccans believe. And I think it needs more historical contextualization, like why we would even believe that, and evidence of to what degree we do actually believe that. So yeah, I think that I saw that coming up a lot, where I needed some more historical context of a particular idea, and I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, back to chapter 2. So I really like her discussion of sacred space and casting circles. I like that she, in chapter 2 and 3, and I like that she differentiated those, and she took 2 whole chapters to explain what one was and then what the other was. because for me that has often been very confusing. Honestly, the whole concept of casting a circle I have often found odd. The idea that you need to protect yourself in the practice of casting a spell, or that that entities might be coming from outside to somehow intrude on your work, and that if you don't cast a spell, the implication always was, a circle, the implication always was to me that something sort of bad could happen. And I guess that just sort of always felt a little bit too fearful to me. I associate fear more with my other religious past rather than like my Wiccan present. So it always seemed a little bit like odd to me. But I do know that you do have a right to do that and cast a circle. It's a boundary, essentially, for whoever, whatever you wouldn't want participating. And yeah, I get that, but I've always found it a little bit odd. And anyway, I feel like her explanation really helped, that basically casting a circle is just sort of an evolved form of creating sacred space, and a bit more formal, and that there are stakes. And I really appreciated this aspect of it, that she put it in terms of the energy it takes you. So like basically think about how formal and how closed off you want your space to be. And if it's really formal and closed off, then cast a circle. And if it's not really formal and closed off, don't cast a circle, just create sacred space. So that made a lot of sense to me. And I like that she put it in terms of the energy use that it would take you, because that framed it like, okay, yes, this is a criteria for making this decision. Now I know what criteria I would use to make this decision. Do I want to spend that energy on casting a circle, or do I want to spend that energy actually doing the spell? And I think it would depend on, on where you are with it. But yeah, I liked that. She says it's less intense and stressful, and allow to just create sacred space, and allows more interaction with the world beyond. So yeah, I thought that was a really helpful, and that's a paraphrase. I thought that was really helpful. Let's see. She also gives a difference between purifying and consecrating, which I thought was helpful. Again, two concepts that I have often heard described together, or to me they always just sounded like the same thing. But it doesn't seem that they are the same thing. It seems that purifying is taking negative energy out, and consecrating is deciding what you want a tool or something to be used for, and then consecrating it to that purpose. So like it's essentially saying to the tool or thing, like, you are going to do this now. And so they're really two totally different purposes, even though to me they always sounded the same. And again, maybe that's just the fact that I'm a beginner, that I'm still, like, relatively speaking, a beginner here. But yeah. Oh, I also really appreciated that she gave different methods for casting circles. I thought that was fascinating. Like, she gave ones that were like multiple layers of circles. She gave ones that were like in 3 dimensions. I thought that was incredible, and I had never really heard about that before. Again, like, just if you want extra layers of protection, or if you want to be able to visualize your space in a different way. So chapter 4, I really enjoyed the energy working skills that she presented. She talked about grounding and centering, which I think we often hear about, and that's one of the most basic things that at least I learned first before anything else. And I often have found that difficult, because I think I've talked about this before. I have difficulty visualizing sometimes, and understanding that what I'm doing is real in a sense, for me. So yeah, grounding and centering has been hard, and I appreciate the way she talks about things. And I think this is common to the way she talks about everything. She talks about everything in terms of a process. She will tell you the steps to do it. She will tell you how it might feel when you're doing it, what might happen. But she doesn't describe everything, and she brings this up actually too, that sometimes people will tell you how these things, people will describe these things solely as a feeling, and people will just say grounding and centering as though you're supposed to know what that is, and as though it's obvious to you. It would be obvious to you when you're grounded. And I think if you're not very good at it, like me, if you're not very good at visualizing, and if you haven't been doing this for a while, grounding may not be this automatic process that you don't have to think about. And you certainly wouldn't be able to do it just by someone telling you, go within and ground yourself. And it's like, what do I do? So I like that she gives it step by step, and that she acknowledges that the way that you're supposed to feel happens from doing steps. And she makes it seem as though, not as though that's automatic and as though it would always happen, but as though you can sort of trust these steps to produce an effect, if that makes sense. So she strikes a balance between relating these steps in a way that allows you to trust the process, and acknowledging that not everyone will always feel these in the same way. And I thought that was really thoughtful. And I'll probably say this again, but that's one of the best things to me about this book, is the way that she talks about things. It's not so much that she's giving information that I haven't heard before, as that she is able to explain things in a really clear, concise way, and she's able to explain things in a way that is authoritative. It feels like you should trust her, and it also gives you more trust in the process that you're taking part in. So yeah, I really appreciate the way that she explains things, and also the insight that she gives into she's clearly thought about this before too, about how things are explained in books, and it's very clear that she's considered the best way to present that information. So yeah, and also she talks about channeling and sensing energy, which are two things I really hadn't thought about at all before. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot, and I just appreciate the focus on energy too, because I think often we think about spells, but energy, as she explains it, is the thing that underlies everything that we do, and it ties everything we do together and makes what we do even possible, in the way she explains it. And so yeah, that it makes a lot of sense focusing on energy. And she also talks a lot about your physical energy, mental energy, and just different types of energy. Let's see. She has a chapter on spells. That's her next chapter. Wait, is it? Hold on. I don't want to mess this up. Chapter 4 is spells and energy work. I paid more attention to the energy work because I was just more interested in it. But yeah, chapter 4 is also spells. Chapter 5 is simple rituals, and chapter 6 is enriching ritual. Chapter 7 is called crafting ritual. So I would say that these 3 chapters make a sort of unit of 3 chapters in which she talks about rituals in different ways. The first one is where she talks about some of the things that I was already mentioning: purifying, banishing, consecrating, dedicating, and blessing. And again, I found all those distinctions really helpful, and the way that she presented them one by one, I found really helpful. Enriching ritual, she just gets into some things that you don't often hear about in this chapter, like costumes, props, and thinking about the dramatic presentation. Crafting ritual, she thinks about she tells you about how to make your own rituals. And I found this incredibly helpful because while I am more familiar with ritual than spellcraft, honestly, because I'm part of a Unitarian Universalist group, and we often do public rituals. That was my first exposure to public ritual, and I was making them up on the fly, along with 2 other women who led the group. And it was like being thrown into the deep end a little bit. Not in a bad way, but in a way. I just appreciate that there's a chapter here thinking about how to do that, and that it is a process that you really have to work at, and that there are steps to be considered. And again, some of them are obvious, what we already know: ritual opening, central working, closing the ritual. I found, again, one thing I found to be really helpful was that she gave different levels of ritual. She thought about how to, basically she said, first you need to decide what the purpose is, and then think about correspondences, and then think about what you want the single central focal event to be. And that was really great, because again, these things often get really mixed up when you're actually doing them. You're doing them kind of all at the same time and not thinking about them as 3 separate steps. But doing so is really helpful, and helps me to feel less overwhelmed and more like I could be organized if I was going to do a ritual. I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but organization is something I really struggle with. So appreciate those kind of tips for sure. Also, she has a section about sabotaging ritual and when not to do ritual, which I found fascinating. Because honestly, I've felt that way before. I felt the way that she describes when she says you shouldn't do ritual, which is that you're just not mentally and emotionally in the right place. You're just not ready for it. And you have a lot of fear, and you just dread. You just don't want to do it. And I think that that's an aspect of stage fright. And if you can sort of work your way out of it, then it's good. But if you can't work your way out of it, then the whole thing feels kind of miserable and you're not actually focusing at all on what's going on. I appreciate that she just gives us an out and says, at that time, you don't have to do it. And while that may not be super practical if you're leading public ritual, I can't imagine actually canceling a ritual because I didn't feel ready. But, if you know you're not ready, you could maybe delegate tasks to someone else or say, look, I know I said I would do this, but if you could do it, I would really appreciate that. You could do this step or this, say this thing. There still could be possibly an out. Chapter 9, she talks about rites of passage. I appreciated that she gave rites of passage for miscarriage and infant loss. Because I think that that's something that's often not talked about as a real loss. We should talk about that more. I also appreciate that she gave a crossing ritual for death. I have never seen a ritual that I would be able to give someone, after I died, just give them the format and be like, here, do this. And it was always honestly kind of scary because I've thought before, what if I died and someone who didn't know what I wanted had control of my funeral, or religious family members who are still Christian had control of it and just did what they wanted. And now I feel like I could just hand them this book and be like, this is what I want after I die. So that is an amazing resource, and it may seem morbid, but again, I think, well, I haven't said this yet, so I'm not sure what I'm saying again, but, we have a reputation as a less death-denying religion, and I think that that's really good and that we should think about it. So I appreciate that she does that. Also for new parents, I thought that was a really great addition, because you think about blessing a baby, but you don't think about blessing yourself and recognizing that you're making a transition when you become a parent. So I thought that was super, super, super helpful. And that's chapter 9. Oh, I skipped chapter 8. Chapter 8 was Sabbats and Esbits. I paid less attention to that one because, again, that's one of the things, maybe I'm different, but that was one of the things I did first. I got really into celebrating Sabbats and Esbits, and also because, You don't celebrate Esbits. What am I saying? Sabbats. I got really into celebrating Sabbats because of, again, my position as leader of this group that often did public rituals. And I thought a lot about what to do at each one and the meaning of each one. And while I think I could always go deeper with that, I think a general book probably wouldn't take me any deeper with it because it's something I've thought about a lot already. But the Esbit part I did think was kind of interesting, particularly because she said that she made this distinction between Sabbats and Esbits, saying that Sabbats should be more celebrated and Esbits should be times for working, like spells. And I thought that was a really helpful distinction. Again, I'm all about the distinctions that she makes. She makes really good distinctions between different things that are often lumped together. And it helps you make categories in your mind, which I really appreciate. Chapter 10 and chapter 11. So chapter 10 was the power of words in ritual, which I really loved. I loved that she has like a little place where she gives instructions for how to write devotional prayers, how to write invocations, that kind of thing. It's things, again, that are often taken for granted and assumed that we just can do without any instruction. But this book gives like some great suggestions, like don't focus just on rhyme, also focus on the scansion, on how it actually sounds when you're saying it, how it scans, and focus on, I forget what else she said about that. But yeah, focus on the scansion. And, she also talks about how to do guided meditations, how to write your own, which was very helpful. Chapter 11 is spiritual archetypes. I thought it was odd that she used the word archetypes because everything she talks about is not an archetype. She talks about gods and goddesses. She talks about archetypes. She talks about ancestors, and she talks about the higher and shadow self. I did think that what she said about the higher and shadow self was really interesting because I had often heard the words your higher self. Oh, think about this, if this is in line with your higher self or what your higher self wants or need, the direction in which your higher self wants you to go. In New Age circles, I've heard that a lot. And it's something that's often just taken for granted, but she really explains what it is. She explains that it's like a concept from, let's see, what does she say about it? I'm just going to go to that chapter real quick and tell you. Yeah, I thought this is it. There is a portion of the spirit or soul responsible for everyone's consciousness, termed the higher self in Western occult thought. This higher self is sometimes described as the part of us that is of the gods or the part that is connected to the collective consciousness. I thought that was really helpful explaining where this concept comes from, that it comes from Western occult thought, and also explaining that it's connected to something higher. Collective consciousness or the gods. And I also like what she said about the shadow self, that the shadow self doesn't want to rule. And I think this is part of the work that everyone's doing in trying to, or that a lot of people are doing in trying to destabilize the idea and the binary that we even have in Wicca. We think about other groups as having this, but we also have historically had that binary between light and dark. And destabilizing that boundary or binary. And so she talks about like how your shadow self doesn't want to rule. It wants to be integrated and it wants to cooperate. And just like the higher self, both work together and both are parts of you. But explaining it in terms of your shadow self doesn't want to rule, I think was really helpful because in pop culture, we have a lot of examples of shadow selves that do want to rule. Like if you think about Star Wars, the dark side is always like trying to get on top and get people to come over to it. And your shadow self doesn't want you to come over to it. It's already part of you. You just have to acknowledge it and work with it. She talked about founding the inner temple, which was, again, something I had not heard of, and I found really, really helpful. I love the idea that there's a place within you that is also in the astral realm. And she also talks about what the astral realm is, how it's in between the worlds, which is, again, is a concept I've often heard bandied about, but not explained. So I love that she gives this, and she explains that the inner temple is like a place within you that you can always go to begin meditation or to do workings. You can essentially visualize yourself doing all of these spells or workings in your inner temple. So I thought that was kind of an amazing idea. Chapter 12, she talks about drawing down and aspecting deities, which I think is what I was referring to earlier, like some of the more advanced stuff that she gets into. And it's honestly, I can't see myself doing either of those things soon, because I think I really need to, as she says in the book, you need to get to know a deity really well before you do that. But I did appreciate how much she broke down the differences between drawing down the moon and aspecting a deity. And she explained how sometimes those things are like conflated, but they're actually different. And aspecting, I also like that she has different layers of aspecting. She talks about how there's something called partial possession and full possession. And then which is partial possession, you might be speaking, and full possession, the deity might actually be acting through you, or you might not remember what's going on when you're in this altered state. And then she also talks about different levels called inspiration, and I forget the last one. Sort of lighter levels, I guess. Aspecting light. Inspiration and conversation. That was the other one. And yeah, I thought those were, inspiration is basically just getting abstract ideas from the deity, and conversation is being able to interact with them. So yeah, so overall, a tremendously helpful book. I would definitely recommend it, and I will definitely be reading her other books. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this book review. I also wanted to say I don't think I said this, it was very recent. It was made in 2019, and I'm going to try to mostly do recent books, just because I think those are the ones that people are going to be reading the most. But I may also do some classics or some things that I just think are really, really helpful that aren't recent as well. So yeah, so expect more of that. Hopefully you'll stick around for that. And yeah, see y'all around.